I grew up in a broken family. My mother left my dad for another man whenever I was 4. My brother was 1. And my dad gave everything he had into fighting for the custody of my brother and I. And eventually he won. At my dad's house, I grew up in church, like Sunday school and children's church on Sundays. And then I go to my mother's house on the weekends, and it's a completely different atmosphere. I was opened up to emotional and physical and verbal abuse. My brother went through sexual abuse. I remember sitting on my mother's bed whenever I was a kid watching cartoons and seeing her roll joints in front of me and smoking them. I remember there being drug deals right in front of my brother and I all growing up. And then came physical abuse where my brother she spit in his face, and then I was hit in the face. I remember waking up in the middle of the night to screaming and hollering. I see my mother throw a glass vase at my stepdad's head and just shattering all over him. I remember one night I'm in my room trying to go to sleep, and my mother walks in and starts to talk to me and tells me that my dad isn't my real father. And she just tried to convince me that she had had an affair with my dad, and in walks this man, and she proclaimed that this was my dad and that there's no reason to go back to my daddy's house because he wasn't my father. I remember crying myself to sleep that night, and then going to my dad's house the next day, and he'd gotten a phone call from my mother saying that he wasn't my father. And I remember my father saying that even if he wasn't my biological father, that he would always be my daddy. And that was the one time I'd ever seen my dad cry. He had gotten an anonymous letter from someone saying that she was running a meth lab in her backyard, and that put a stop to us going over to her house. But it didn't stop her from making threatening phone calls and leaving voicemails on her answering machine. It didn't stop her from showing up in the school parking lot and yelling vulgar names at me as I walk across the school parking lot. It tells me that I've been brainwashed by my father, that I'm going to hell for being a terrible daughter and for a terrible person. And then whenever I got to high school, I started dating a guy, but to me it started to fill the void that I felt from my mother. As the relationship went on, it got more and more serious. About a 1.5 years later, on my birthday, he gave me a promise ring and promised me everything. He promised me to be faithful and respectful, and he promised me the future. And then so that was whenever I turned 16, and that was when I got into drinking and partying, which then became temptation with my relationship and with physical boundaries being crossed, because I devoted 100% of myself to this guy and to this relationship. The summer after we graduated, he proposed, and I said yes. And I was dead set on coming to UAB, so he followed me here, and it wasn't until fall semester of sophomore year that I was playing intramural volleyball with a bunch of people from Life 180, and there's a few people that just constantly asked me to come to Life 180, and I came up with every excuse in the book to why I couldn't come. And eventually I just was sick of making excuses, so I came one night. and God instantly started working in my life. And I started feeling this pull towards God and Him wanting to guide me in a different direction. And I got so angry with God for wanting to change my plans for my life. I had my entire life set, and I fought it with everything in me. I did not want it to happen because I was so set with these plans that I had for my life. The more I went to Life 180, the more that God started working in my life, and the more that I started changing. God started opening my eyes to issues within my relationship with this guy, and this guy became more controlling and demanding and deceiving, and I just kept lying to myself, telling me this is the best that I deserved, that I would never experience anything greater. I constantly stressed about this relationship. It brought me to complete depression, where I was making myself sick. It was taking a toll on my health, on my school, on my work, and just every aspect of my life. And I remember breaking down and telling him I didn't think it was going to work out, and driving to Huntsville to see my dad at midnight one night. And I get home and talk to my parents and just tell them everything I've been going through, and my dad thought that since God was pulling me in a different direction, that that's the path I needed to take. And I was done. I was just ready to give up everything that I had ever believed and ever done, and everything I put forth in this relationship, because I was so stressed out and in such deep depression about it, and I knew I couldn't handle it by myself anymore. I knew that I had to turn to God and Him just guide me in the direction that He had planned for me. And so in March this past semester, I ended a 5-year relationship to a guy that I was engaged to be married to. God just sparked a fire in my heart and in my life, and I just completely just broke down on my knees and just asked Him to take the reins in my life and to just guide me with His plan and His word. I came across Jeremiah 29:11, which says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." And it was then that I was just completely broken down, and I fell on my knees and just asked God to direct me in every aspect of my life and just to guide me. And I just completely opened up my arms to Him into my life. And ever since then, my life has just done a complete 180, where I just live for the Lord and just don't even do anything for myself. Just make sure that I do everything to glorify Him. I will never have to feel a void again because I have God's love in my life.